December 26, 1995. Beverly Hills. Rosa Mendez stood in the hallway of Dean Martin's house, staring at a door she'd walked past thousands of times but never opened. For 20 years, she'd cleaned every room in this mansion, every bathroom, every closet, every corner. But not this one. Dean had been clear from day one. "Don't go in there, Rosa. Ever." She never asked why. He never explained. And yesterday, on Christmas Day, Dean Martin died in his sleep. Now his family was gathered downstairs, sorting through his belongings, trying to make sense of the wreckage he'd left behind. And they all wanted to know what was behind that locked door. Jean Martin, Dean's ex-wife, found Rosa in the hallway. "Rosa, what's in that room?" Rosa's hands trembled. "I don't know, Mrs. Martin. Mr. Dean, he never let me inside. Not once in 20 years. Jean frowned. They'd been divorced since 1973, but she'd known this house, known Dean's habits, known his secrets. Or so she thought. But this was different. Deanna Martin, Dean's daughter, joined them, holding a small brass key. "I found this in Dad's bedroom, on his nightstand. There's a note taped to it." She held it up. The note was in Dean's handwriting, shaky but legible. "For when I'm gone." "Open it then." The three women looked at each other. Jean nodded slowly. Let's see what he was hiding. Deanna slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door swung open, and the air that escaped was stale, frozen in time, like opening a tomb. They stepped inside, and what they saw stopped them cold. It wasn't a storage room, it wasn't an office. It was a bedroom. A young man's bedroom, perfectly preserved, untouched. And they all knew immediately whose room it was. Dean Paul Martin, Dean's oldest son, the boy who died in a fighter jet crash on March 21st, 1987, 8 years ago. But in this room, time had stopped on March 20th, the night before the crash. The bed was made, military-tight corners. A leather jacket hung on the back of a chair. Tennis trophies lined a shelf. Photos covered one entire wall. Dean Paul as a baby, held by his father. Dean Paul at 16, the day he got his pilot's license, grinning with that same smile Dean had. Dean Paul in his Air Force uniform, standing next to his F-4 Phantom jet. Dean Paul with Dorothy Hamill, his arm around her, both of them young and impossibly beautiful. Every stage of his life, documented, organized, preserved. Rosa covered her mouth. She'd known the room was here. She'd known Dean went inside sometimes late at night. But she'd never imagined this. Jean walked slowly to the wall of photos, tears already streaming down her face. He kept it exactly the way it was. My God, he never let go. Dina moved to the desk. On it sat a stack of letters, neatly arranged. She picked up the top one. The handwriting was Dean's. The date, April 15th, 1987. Less than a month after the crash. She opened it and began to read aloud, her voice breaking. "Dino, I don't know why I'm writing this. You're gone. You're not coming back. But I can't stop talking to you. I keep expecting you to call. I keep hearing your voice in my head. 'Hey, Dad, just landed. Everything's fine.' Except you didn't land. You never will. And I don't know how to live with that." Dina stopped, unable to continue. Rosa stepped closer, looking at the desk. There were dozens of letters, maybe 100, all addressed to Dean Paul, all written by Dean. All unsent, all unread, a father's one-sided conversation with a ghost. Jean found something else, a small answering machine on the nightstand, the old kind with a cassette tape inside. The red light was blinking. "Messages saved, one." She looked at Deanna. "Should I?" Deanna nodded. Jean pressed play. The tape crackled, and then a voice filled the room. Young, confident, full of life. "Hey, Dad, it's me. Just wanted to let you know I'm flying tomorrow morning early. Weather's supposed to be a little rough, but nothing I can't handle. I'll call you when I land. Love you, Pops. Talk soon." The message ended. March 20th, 1987. 9:47 p.m., the last time Dean ever heard his son's voice, and he'd kept it. For 8 years, he'd kept it. Rosa understood now. Dean hadn't been visiting a room. He'd been visiting his son. To understand what that room meant, you need to understand what Rosa saw over those 20 years. She'd started working for Dean and Jean in 1975, when the house on Mountain Drive was alive with noise and laughter. 7 kids running through the halls. Parties every weekend. Dean, still at the peak of his career, still performing, still smiling that famous smile. But even then, Rosa noticed something. Dean wasn't like other celebrities. At home, he was quiet, shy, almost. He'd avoid the parties Jean threw, slip away to the den and watch old westerns by himself. He didn't care if it insulted anyone, producers, directors, even Frank Sinatra. If Dean didn't want to socialize, he didn't. Rosa liked that about him. He was real. But in 1987, everything changed. March 21st. Dean Paul's F-4 Phantom jet took off from March Air Force Base on a routine training mission. 9 minutes later, it disappeared from radar. The weather had turned. A snowstorm. Visibility 0. An air traffic controller at Ontario Airport frantically radioed Dean Paul to change course, to avoid the mountain. But the message came too late. Or maybe it never got through. The jet slammed into Mount San Gorgonio at 400 miles per hour. Dean Paul Martin and his weapons officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz, were killed instantly. Dean Paul was 35 years old. Rosa was at the house when the officers came to the door. She answered it. 2 men in dress uniforms, their faces somber. "We're looking for Mr. Dean Martin." Rosa knew immediately. You don't get that kind of visit for good news. She called Dean. He came to the door, saw the uniforms, and his face went white. "No," he said quietly. "No, not my boy." But it was, and from that moment, the Dean Martin the world knew ceased to exist. Rosa watched him disappear, not physically. He was still there, walking through the house, breathing, eating, but the light in his eyes? Gone. The easy smile? Vanished. 3 days after the funeral, Dean went upstairs to Dean Paul's room and locked the door behind him. He stayed in there for hours. When he came out, his eyes were red, his face hollow. He found Rosa in the kitchen. "Don't clean that room anymore, Rosa." She nodded. "Of course, Mr. Dean." He looked at her, and for a moment she saw something break. "It's all I have left of him. I need it to stay the way it is, like he's just away for a while, like he's coming back." Rosa touched his hand gently. "I understand." And she did. Over the next 8 years, Rosa watched Dean Martin slowly fade. He stopped performing. The offers poured in. Vegas, television, films. But he said no to everything. "I don't have it in me anymore, Rosa," he told her one day. "I can't stand up there and smile and pretend everything's fine when my boy is in the ground." He stopped seeing friends. Frank Sinatra called constantly. Sammy Davis Jr. tried to visit. Dean turned them all away. He wanted to be alone. Alone with his grief. Alone with that locked room. Rosa noticed the rituals. Every night around 2 a.m., Dean would wake up and go to Dean Paul's room. She'd hear the door unlock, hear him go inside, hear the door close. Sometimes music would play softly. Everybody loves somebody. Sometimes there was just silence. He'd stay in there for an hour, sometimes 2, then come back out and go to bed. He never spoke about what he did in there. But Rosa knew. He was talking to his son. The routine became Dean's entire life. He'd wake up late, around noon. He'd put on the same outfit every day, navy blue pants and a light blue shirt. Rosa would make him breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, but he'd barely touch it. Then he'd sit in the den and watch old westerns. The Searchers, Rio Bravo, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Over and over. At 6 p.m., he'd shower, get dressed in slightly nicer clothes, and his driver would take him to La Famiglia, an Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills. He'd eat alone, always the same table in the back, always the same dish, Clams Casino. The waiters knew not to bother him. He'd sit there for an hour, twirling his pasta, letting the clam juice drip down his shirt, staring at nothing. Rosa tried to help. She'd cook his favorite meals. She'd suggest going for a walk, but Dean would just shake his head. "I'm fine, Rosa." "Really?" But he wasn't fine. Anyone could see that. He lost weight. His clothes hung off him like a scarecrow. His hair turned completely gray, then white. His hands developed a tremor. The king of cool, The man who'd once commanded stages in Vegas and made millions of people laugh had become a ghost haunting his own house. And then, in May 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. died, Dean's best friend, his brother, the final member of the Rat Pack still close to him. Frank Sinatra organized the funeral and called Dean. "Please, Dino, for Sammy. He'd want you there." Dean went. It was the first time he'd left the house for anything other than dinner in 3 years. And at Sammy's funeral, something inside Dean shattered completely. He broke down at the graveside, sobbing, unable to stand. Frank and 2 others had to hold him up. When he came home that day, he went straight to Dean Paul's room and didn't come out for 3 days. Rosa left food outside the door. She'd knock gently. "Mr. Dean, please eat something." No response. On the 3rd day, the door finally opened. Dean stumbled out, looking like he'd aged 20 years. He'd lost another 10 pounds. His eyes were sunken, hollow. He looked at Rosa and said something she'd never forget. "Sammy's gone. My boy's gone. I got nothing left, Rosa. I'm just waiting my turn." From that point on, Dean Martin wasn't living. He was just existing, waiting to die. The years dragged on. 1991, 1992, 1993. Dean became more and more isolated. He stopped answering the phone entirely. Rosa would screen his calls. Frank Sinatra, Shirley MacLaine, Bob Newhart. Old friends trying to reach him. Dean would just shake his head. "Tell them I'm not here." So Rosa did. She lied for him because she understood. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to pretend to be okay. He just wanted to be left alone with his grief. One night in 1994, Rosa found Dean asleep on the floor of Dean Paul's room. He was lying on his side, clutching his son's Air Force uniform jacket, the one Dean Paul had worn in photos. Rosa stood in the doorway, not wanting to disturb him, but worried. He looked so fragile, so broken. She grabbed a blanket from the linen closet and gently covered him. Dean stirred but didn't wake. Rosa left quietly, closing the door behind her. She never mentioned it. Some things were too sacred to speak about. By 1995, Dean was barely functioning. He'd sit in the den for hours, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the television even when it wasn't on. Rosa would talk to him, trying to get some response. "Mr. Dean, would you like me to make spaghetti tonight? You used to love my spaghetti." He'd nod slightly. "Sure, Rosa, whatever you want." But when she'd bring it to him, he wouldn't eat. She'd find the plate later, untouched, cold. December 24th, 1995, Christmas Eve. Rosa came to the house to drop off a small meal for Dean. She found him sitting in Dean Paul's room, which was unusual. The door was open. Dean was holding a framed photo of his son, taken the day Dean Paul graduated from flight school. In the picture, Dean Paul was smiling, wearing his uniform, his wings pinned to his chest. Dean looked up when Rosa entered, and for the first time in years he spoke openly. "Rosa, did I ever tell you about the last conversation I had with him? The real one, not the answering machine?" Rosa shook her head. "No, Mr. Dean." Dean's voice was quiet, barely a whisper. "It was the night before he flew. March 20th. He called me from the base. Said he had a mission the next day, just a training run. I told him the weather looked bad. Told him maybe they'd cancel it. You know what he said?" Rosa waited. He laughed. He said, "Dad, I'm an Air Force pilot. I can fly in anything." And I believed him, because he was good. He was so damn good at everything. Dean's hands were shaking. I should have told him not to go. I should have insisted. But I didn't. I just said, "Okay, son, fly safe. Love you." And he said, "Love you too, Pops. Talk to you tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. Dean looked around the room, at the photos, at the uniform, at the life preserved in this small space. "This room, Rosa, it's the only place where he's still alive. Out there in the real world, he's gone. But in here, he's still my boy. He's still coming home." Rosa felt tears running down her face. "Mr. Dean, he's always with you. He never left." Dean smiled sadly. "I know. That's why I can't leave either. I've been waiting, Rosa, waiting to see him again, and I think my wait is almost over." The next morning, December 25th, Christmas Day, Rosa received a call from Dean's assistant. Dean Martin had died peacefully in his sleep. He was 78 years old. The official cause was acute respiratory failure, but Rosa knew the truth. Dean had died of a broken heart. He'd been dying since March 21st, 1987. It just took his body 8 years to catch up with his soul. Back in the room, December 26th, Jean, Diana, and Rosa stood in silence, surrounded by the evidence of a father's endless grief. Diana walked to the closet and opened it. Inside, hanging on a velvet hanger, was Dean Paul's Air Force dress uniform, perfectly preserved. Next to it, a small wooden box. Diana opened it. Inside were a pair of pilot wings, gleaming silver. A note was tucked beneath them. Diana read it aloud. "For Dino, I was going to give these to you when you made captain. I'm so proud of you, son. Love, Dad." The wings had never been given. Dean Paul had died before the promotion, but Dean had kept them, waiting, always waiting. Rosa moved to the nightstand and found something else. A letter dated December 24th, 1995, the night before Dean died, the last thing he'd written. Dina took it with trembling hands and read, "Dino, tonight is Christmas Eve. You should be here. We should be watching a Western together, arguing about whether John Wayne or Jimmy Stewart was the better cowboy. But you're not here, and I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired, son. I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. I'm tired of waking up every day knowing you're gone. I'm tired of walking past your room and remembering you'll never come back. I kept this room exactly the way you left it because I thought maybe, just maybe, if I kept everything the same, you'd walk through that door one more time. But you won't, and I know that. So tonight, I'm going to sleep, and I hope when I wake up, I'm wherever you are. I hope you're waiting for me, because I've been waiting for you for 8 years. I miss you, Dino. I miss you so much it's killing me. Or maybe it's already killed me, and I just didn't notice. Either way, I'll see you soon. Your dad, who never stopped loving you." The room was silent. Jean wiped her eyes. Diana folded the letter carefully. Rosa closed her eyes, whispering a prayer. They stood there for a long time, the three women, in the room that had become a shrine to grief. Finally, Jean spoke. "We're not touching this room. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This was his sanctuary. We need to respect that." Diana and Rosa nodded in agreement. As they left the room and closed the door behind them, Rosa understood something she'd always suspected, but never fully grasped. The world had known Dean Martin as the king of cool, the man who never sweated, never worried, never cared. But that was the performance. The real Dean Martin, the one behind the locked door, was just a father who loved his son more than life itself. And when that son died, so did he. The rest was just his body going through the motions, waiting for permission to stop. Dean Martin didn't die on Christmas Day, 1995. He died on March 21st, 1987, at the exact moment his son's F-4 Phantom hit Mount San Gorgonio. Everything after that was just an 8-year goodbye. And that locked room? It wasn't about preserving memories. It was about preserving sanity. It was the only place where Dean could be himself, where he didn't have to pretend to be okay, where he could cry and scream and talk to his son without judgment. It was his refuge, his prison, his purgatory. Rosa left the house that day and never went back. She couldn't. Every room reminded her of Dean, of the man he'd been and the ghost he'd become. But she never forgot him, and she never forgot that room, because it taught her something about grief that most people never understand. Grief doesn't end. It doesn't heal. It doesn't get better with time. It just becomes part of you. And for some people, like Dean Martin, it becomes everything. Years later, when people asked Rosa what Dean Martin was really like, she'd tell them about the locked room, about the letters, about the answering machine message he never erased, about the father who loved his son so much that losing him meant losing himself. And she'd say, Dean Martin wasn't the coolest man in the world. He was the saddest, but he loved deeper than most people ever will. And that kind of love doesn't die, even when everything else does.